Hi, I'm Dr. Cindy Dupuy. I have a PhD in learning disabilities, and I do diagnostic evaluations, advocacy, and a little bit of intervention. And I'm also an adult with dyslexia and dysgraphia.
Hi, my name is Kim Sharman. I've worked with kids for 15 years with dyslexia, dysgraphia, ADHD, age range from kindergarten all the way through college.
Awesome. And so today we are going to talk about, as I reach behind me, and pardon my reach there, everybody, pre-reading before you read. So, Kim, why is pre-reading so important?
Pre-reading is essential because a lot of times, how many times has your child said to you, I read it 5 times and I have no idea what it says or what it means?
Yes.
They say it all
Or
the time. Or I read this entire book, but I have no idea what it's about.
and they're going through the motions. I talk to kids about active reading and passive reading, right? And so active reading is I'm actually getting meaning from the words on the page versus passive reading, which is my eyes decoded the words, but I got no meaning from it, but my eyes passed over it, therefore I read the book, right? And
Yeah.
so that doesn't get us there, right? So, what we want to do today is talk about specific things that we should be doing as a pre reading activity, right? And
Right.
so, the first one that we should talk about that I made a quick note on is the purpose. And Kim, you go about finding the purpose in a lot of different ways. So, what are some of your favorite ways of finding the purpose of the book?
My favorite ways, the first step I always take when I have to read a brand new book that I've never touched before is I always go to Shmoop first, SHMOOP. And I want to see on this website if they have analysis. The
There's
people,
my Schmoop and Spark notes, but
right.
let me rewrite that. Keep going. So what?
And so Shmoop is a website. I think they're charging more money now to get some of the videos. But what it does, it is a complete analysis by Harvard, Stanford graduate students, and they go in depth as to understanding the location, the time period, the cultural issues at the time this book was written. They may give a bit about the author itself. Then they also give information as to what the themes are, what you're going to be looking for. That is a key to saying, what is the author trying to get you to notice about his or her writing? What kind of themes, what kind of moral issues or cultural issues is that author trying to make you perk up and notice when you're reading this book? A lot of times kids need to know that even before they read the book so that they will be hypersensitive to understanding.
So that kind of leads us naturally into the story context. Now, I very clearly remember I was working with a middle school girl who was asked to read a book, not my favorite book because it's purported to be true, but it's actually not, called Three Cups of Tea. And I read her a little bit of it and I said, so what of this do you understand? And she said, nothing. I said, do you know where this is? She said, no. He said, do you know what this guy is doing? She said, I have no clue. I said, do you know what's happening in this area of the world? She said, no. And so I had to give her a ton of context. So I opened up an atlas and we looked at where it was happening in the world and we talked about some of the events that were occurring during that time. I also had to give her context for what the terrain of the area looked like because it was talking about an individual who was claiming that he was hiking in the mountains of Nepal and took a wrong turn and that he was bivvying in the wilderness and she had no clue what that meant. And I had to explain that to her. And so as I was beginning to build these little pieces, she began to understand a lot more of the story and what was going on. And so she could get a little deeper into it. So I believe in that. And that's one of the advantages of Smoop is they give the story context, right?
Right. And you may say, well, the teacher should be giving that, but oftentimes they don't, either the kid doesn't get it or the teacher doesn't do it. So you've got to do it yourself.
Well,
Um,
and I keep writing these down, and then this piece of paper covering it just completely erases it. So pardon my low tech. So then you love to do another thing, which is to get a story summary. And boy,
Right.
that summary looks awful. Let me rewrite that while you talk about where do you go to find that?
Well, again, since I have to become the expert on this book, sometimes I look at the New York Times review of this book. Sometimes I look at Kirkus reviews. A lot of times I will type in analysis of The Great Gatsby or analysis of Three Cups of Tea. And I want to understand a couple different points of view of what people's perceptions of this book is. And then before I even work with the student, I already know the bottom line. It would be very beneficial for these kids also to, I mean, we're talking like 10 or 15 minutes.
Right. And, the summary on the back is a little helpful, but not enough detail. And another great place to go is to go on Amazon or Great Reads or Barnes and Noble or wherever, and they will often have a summary and an explanation and then a set of reviews. And then we also say, so now we're asking kids to do more reading, which most kids don't want to. And that's where you as a parent kind of step in, right? Or you get the tutor or whoever your kid is working with to do that. We can also talk another time about how you turn on text to speech on a computer so you can actually have the computer read it to you. Now, one of the other things I like to do is I like to make a character map. Do you know what I mean by that?
Yes, it's critical.
Tell me how do you think of a character map?
So, of course, we think of Shakespeare's great Midsummer's Night Dream and like these complex characters that all have interactions with each other. And I can take any book, I'm talking the Iliad to Shakespeare to anything, and create a character map where I show the character and show that character's relationship to the other characters. And I literally write it on a piece of paper, I draw lines, and I have that next to me as I'm reading the book.
Right, because then I cannot tell you how many times I've gotten confused about what character says what, where, when. And having that character map with some sort of picture of who they are and what they're doing, like dramatically changes how I understand that story. Any Shakespeare, like you have so many characters in Shakespeare, sometimes you're like, who was that? What was their role? What did they do? Why were they important? All of that.
I think of the Scarlet Letter. I mean, it helps so much to have all of this next to you.
Okay, now, one final thing that I did not write down because most people go, when I say watch the movie. Why do we watch the movie before we read the book, Kim?
It gives the kids a visual foundation to be able to see in their head what the nuances are of these characters.
A lot of our kids don't have a mental image of what's actually happening in the story, to which every teacher will then say, well, then they're not going to read the book. Well, but if they don't have this, all they're going to do is passively read it, and they're not going to understand anything of it to begin with, right? So they're going to give up early, and they're, going to thumb through pages and go, and not get anything out of it. Now, if you have a good book, we actually got, Kim, do you remember when we worked with Joey on his book and we ruined the end of Mice and Men for him, and he was like so bummed?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So you could stop it before you get to the end and the big reveal. So you can watch like the first half of the movie, and it gives kids so much more understanding of what's happening and why, and it gives them depth, and they have a sense of where the story is going, and they're more likely to get a lot more out of it.
And when these kids have to write a paper on a thesis statement for their paper, it's going to be a heck of a lot easier that you spent this 15 to 30 minutes understanding this information.
So again, why are we reading this? What's the author trying to say? Where is this happening? What does this universe look like? What is the story about? Who are the characters? Watching the movie first, and using great websites like Shmoop and SparkNotes. All right, we will see you again soon.